Well, so I want to jump into this topic. Why do we choose wrong when we're dating? Why we keep choosing the same person but different faces? I want to talk about that a little bit more. And of course, I talk about that and I printed out my ebook, Another Chance, a workbook for finding love after a failed relationship. So you could pick this up at scarytobemarried.com under the products page. And this is where I'm going to pull the content from because I think this is one area in relationships where we get tripped up is when we're dating. I want to talk about one that will really, it's very simple, but it's worth discussing in detail. I want to talk about in the second chapter, we're going to talk about some of it, recognizing red flags and patterns. So I want to talk about that. And there was an article in Forbes that read this: the hidden cost of operating on autopilot. That's the main reason why a lot of us choose wrong when it comes to dating. We're living on autopilot. We don't really take the time to think about how we're feeling. And before we make certain decisions, we just go right into autopilot. And we just thinking like, okay, this is the way I like somebody. I know I like this person when I'm doing this, and vice versa. So a lot of times that's like that with people we date. We kind of show up as the same person over and over again when we're dating. And so a lot of times we end up in autopilot. So I want to talk about this in the Forbes article, The Hidden Cost of Operating on Autopilot. It says this: the impact of operating in default mode, which they call it, can be steep. For instance, 76% of people in the study reported not spending their time well, with one in five admitting to not properly listening to others when in autopilot mode. Right? Now, when you're dating, I'm I'm assuming that you're not on your phone. I'm assuming that when you're on this date, you just have this person undivided attention. It's just you and this person. Because a lot of times, and my wife and I, we talk about this, is whatever you're doing on your phone, that's okay. I'll talk to you after you're finished doing what you're doing. But while you're on your phone, I'm just going to give you your time. A lot of times, I'll just stop, or vice versa. When my wife is talking, or when I'm talking, we just stop because one of us might be on our phone. So it's like, wait till you finish because you want to be present opposed to just thinking that you know everything and you know everything about this person. Because when people are talking, you want to pay attention to the details. They talk about body language, all these different things that really, really matter when it comes to dating. So some of those red flags we miss because we aren't paying attention and we're on autopilot. Even when we're not on our phones, we're in autopilot. So let me finish reading some of this to you, which I find very interesting. Nearly half said they have forgotten something while on autopilot, including birthdays, paying important bills, and even picking up their children from school. I don't know if any of you been guilty of that. You're like, oh shoot, I forgot to go pick up my child from school. That whole thing. Because we're on autopilot. We're thinking of just the regular things that go on throughout the course of a day. And unconscious patterns, it says, or living on autopilot can lead to you to enter another relationship with the same type of person, just with a different face. Developing self awareness allows you to recognize where you went wrong in the past relationships so you won't repeat the same mistakes in the future. Are you self aware? And that's why not living on autopilot is very important when you're dating, because we assume that we know everyone, and so we make the same mistakes. We just assume because this person have a different face that this person is different, but a lot of times we aren't aware. And so a lot of times when we get caught up in those kind of relationships, next thing you know, 3 or 4 years then went past, and you're wondering, how did I end up here with this person? A lot of times it's because we've been on autopilot and we assume that we know everything. So here's some insights from the book, and I want to go over some of the stuff in chapter 3 too. I don't want to go over everything. You got to go pick up the book. But here's some insights that's very important. Unconscious patterns often lead to repeated relationship challenges, and self awareness is crucial in identifying and breaking unhealthy cycles. So, I wanted to talk about some of that um, autopilot. So, make sure you pay attention to when you are dating, opposed to feeling like you know everything, you've been there, you may be in your mid 30s, your early 30s, you're like, I've heard it all, I've seen it all, but you haven't, because everyone is different. Everyone brings a different set of issues to the table. And so if you aren't aware, you just assume that this person, you got it all figured out, but you actually don't. So I want to kind of jump into chapter 3, because I don't want to give away everything, but I think some of these points are very important. They're very valid. And so in chapter 3, we're talking about defining your needs and desires. Knowing your needs and desires can be challenging. Whatever you lacked in a previous relationship often becomes a priority when entering a new one. For example, if you didn't receive much quality time in your last relationship, it may now be at the top of your list of needs. Now, this is another dangerous one, because this relationship that you had, that you were in for 3 or 4 years, like it's saying in the first paragraph, whatever you lacked, that just, it shoots up, it becomes number one on your priority list. And so even though that was important to you when you enter a new relationship, again, that other person they might possess that for you, but then there's going to be something else that that person is lacking. And then you're going to want something else from this person now that you've been in a relationship with them for a certain amount of time. So we have to realize, like, what are our non-negotiables? What are we willing to deal with? What are some things that I can live with? I think that's an important question too. What can I live with? Because we are all flawed. We are all beautifully broken, as I like to say. And so we have to make sure that we know ourselves enough, because I think we don't know ourselves after being in a relationship for so many years, is that we just ready to jump into another relationship. And I get it, because relationships, getting to meet somebody new, it's a beautiful thing. The adrenaline is pumping, and you're feeling good about this person. But there's so much about that person that you're dating that you have to unpack. And you're never going to fully know this person. It takes a lifetime to know someone, because they're always evolving and changing. So I think that's something that we have to be patient with if we're willing to do life with this person, because they're their own person and they're growing and evolving. And if you aren't paying attention, you can lose that person in the turn, because you're looking at things from who they were 2 or 3 years ago, but they shifted. They're somebody totally different now. And I think that's where a lot of marriages go wrong, is because they aren't aware of someone else changing in the process. So I want to talk about some of this in chapter 3. Talk about seeking personal fulfillment while in a committed relationship can come with its own set of challenges, especially if you enter the relationship as a single parent. Single parenting, we haven't talked about that enough. That's a whole show within itself, about single parenting and getting into relationships, and kids being involved. This was a source of tension in my marriage until we had an honest conversation and sought therapy about what personal fulfillment looks like for us as a married couple with children. Sharing growth can take many forms, such as attending therapy together. Now, here's the thing about therapy together. I'm a huge fan of therapy, right? But I think it's important that we have individual therapists. There was a time in my marriage where we had 3 therapists in our marriage. My wife had her own individual therapist. I had my own individual therapist. And then we have a marriage therapist who we saw together. A lot of therapy going on, but it was worth it, because sometimes you can get into therapy and you're just there with you and your spouse, or you and your significant other, and you're talking about marriage problems, but a lot of times those marriage problems come from personal unresolved issues. So that's something that we don't talk about enough, because we thinking we having this problem in our marriage, but no, it's the pain that happened to you, something that happened to you at 10 or something that happened to you at 12 that you haven't been able to unpack yet, or you haven't had the courage to unpack it yet. So I think individual therapy is very important. Okay. So many forms, such as attending therapy together, reading books together. That's a huge one. I think that's very important as well, because everything isn't just about from you and your significant other or spouse vantage point. It's like you're reading something together, and even though you might have your own experiences, you're reading this book together, and you're like seeing what the author is saying about this book, about whatever you're reading. And then you can bring your experiences in together, and then also talk about what they talked about in the book, which really calls for very stimulating conversation. So, of course, reading books together, or participating in classes and conferences as a couple. If you attend a church, if your church has a marriage class, I think that's very beneficial. You get around other people who have similar issues as you. A lot of times we think that I'm the only one that's dealing with this. I'm the only one that's struggling with this. And in actuality, there's other people that's in the same boat as you. You just haven't found the people that have those same issues as you do. But you'll be surprised how many people struggle with that in the church or in any other marriage group that you might be in. And when you start to find that community of people who you feel that you can relate to, now all of a sudden the transparency and the vulnerability becomes real. And now you're starting to have conversations. And then all of a sudden now you might have been able to connect with another couple, and who knows where that relationship goes. Like you will be surprised who you can come in who you can come in contact with, and you and that couple, y'all could become friends, for years, and you just never know. So you have classes and conferences as a couple. It's in these shared experiences that true transformation happens. The conversations become deeper and the relationship progresses more quickly, because there is power when two people are in agreement. The Bible talks about how can two walk together unless they be agreed. So I think that's very important. When you both can agree on something, there's so much power in that. A lot of times we can't generate power in our relationship because we're too busy fighting each other, or too busy fighting our individual thoughts, and this is the way I think things should be, and this is the way I think things should be. When in actuality, when you come together in agreement, and I also have an agreement model that really works for my wife and I. Something that we learned in our marriage class was this agreement model that help us to make a decision together and do what's best for the marriage. Because a lot of times people get married for selfish reasons, right? And we're all guilty of it. But do you understand the purpose of marriage? Like, why are you getting married? When you understand the purpose of marriage, then you can you can have better conversations, and you can just talk about the things that glorify the marriage, that helps the couple become more than who they actually are, because your marriage is just bigger than you. So there are power when two people come into agreement. So here's some insights I want to share from this chapter. On chapter 3, insights is knowing your needs and desires is essential for choosing a compatible partner. Remember, we talked about before, knowing yourself. That's very important. And then another insight is seeking personal fulfillment and shared growth is crucial for lasting connection. So there's a lot of growth that comes from, like I said, attending conferences together, reading books together, therapy. When you start to grow, hopefully you and your spouse or significant other are growing together. I think that's important. When you are growing together, then that's when the true power comes into place. If you have any questions, make sure that you leave them below. Taking questions, I wanted to just read a little bit from the second and third chapter. So if you have any questions, leave them below. We'd love to hear some of your feedback. Feel free to pick up the ebook at scaredtoremarry.com. The cool part about it is you can print it out, and you can actually work on the work part of the book, and you can actually write down your thoughts and journal some things. So I think that's very helpful. And before you jump into a new relationship, you feel like, okay, I have a better understanding of myself now that I've went through this ebook. But if you don't have any questions, totally understand. Make sure you go to the website, scarytoremarry.com. Have a bunch of freebies up there for you too as well. I have some free videos. There's a free quiz on there that you get to know if you want to remarry again. Of course, hence Scary to Remarry. So check out the website. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Share this with a friend. Also feel free to follow on Instagram and TikTok, Scary to Remarry. You'll find me all under Scary to Remarry. This is Sean Heineman, and I am out.